I think it's just me. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee and staff. Thank you for inviting me to provide you with an update on the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. My name is Josh Daniels, and I'm the Director of Communication and Outreach for the CCEE, and I'm also a member of the school board for the Berkeley Unified School District. As you may know, the CC is overseen by a 5-member governing board. Our chair is Sandy Thorstensen. She is the superintendent of the Whittier Union High School District. Our vice chair is Sue Burr, who also serves on the state board. We have 3 other members of the governing board. Of course, there's our state superintendent, Tom Torlickson, Michael Watkins, who's the superintendent in Santa Cruz County, and Tim Sabranti, who is a teacher from the Dublin Unified School District. Our executive director is Dr. Carl Cohn. He is a former superintendent from Long Beach and San Diego, and he also previously served on the state board. In addition to myself, the CCEE has 4 other full-time staff members. Aida Molina and Socorro Shields serve as our directors of education. Suji Shin serves as our director of research and assessment. And Erica Barragon provides administrative support to our team. We are located around the state in Alameda County, Kern County, Sonoma County, Riverside County, and LA County. 5 out of the 58 is pretty good. In the words of our executive director, the CCEE is a remarkably different kind of initiative. We are small and nimble as a state agency, and we were established by the legislature to partner with LEAs, charter schools, school districts, county offices, to help them achieve their LCAP goals. To do so, our focus is to build internal capacity to support system-wide continuous improvement within the LEAs. The CCEE is not focused on compliance, and we do not see it as our role to tell LEAs what to do. We want to establish a partnership with the LEAs with whom we work. This approach, which is based on the concept of subsidiarity that is fundamental to local control, is radically different than what's been in place for the previous 40 years. And as such, it will take time to implement. But we are off to a promising start. At the end of this month, the CCEE staff, along with a couple of talented members from the Riverside County Office of Ed, will travel to Blythe, California, to visit the Palo Verde Unified School District, which, for those of you who know, is at the east end of Riverside County on the border with Arizona. We'll spend 2 days there getting to know the district and the community. We will, of course, conduct school site visits and meet with local education leaders. But equally important, what we will do there is to get to know the community and understand what makes the residents of Blythe and the district proud to call that area their home. And I think that this is a key factor or facet of how the CCEE intends to operate. We want to go in to LEAs that welcome us, that want us there. We're not going to go in with a heavy hand and force them to listen to us. In addition to Palo Verde, the CCEE is exploring the possibility of partnering with a few other LEAs as part of a pilot to determine how best to get the right kind of help to school districts, charter schools, and county offices of education. And certainly, if Senate Bill 871 were to pass, the CCEE would be ready to submit the required plan for implementing the pilot program to the legislature and the administration as called for in that bill. In addition to the pilot, the CCEE staff, led by Dr. Cohen, has embarked on an introductory tour around the state. The tour has involved and will continue to involve site visits to districts and charter schools, meetings with the superintendents and school board members, and of course ongoing collaboration with county offices, CDE, and the State Board of Education. Additionally, we have sat down and will continue to reach out to education stakeholders around the state to discuss the role of the CCEE and to hear their thoughts and concerns regarding LCFF. Thank you for your time today and your support, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay. Questions for this panel? Mr. Chavez?
Well, I'm glad we're having this. As we started this some years ago, we knew that it'd take 3 to 5 years to make it work, so I appreciate how you're all working on it. But I'd like to focus on a couple of issues, though, just for clarification. Is it a general recognition, I think three of you talked about it, that as far as the LCAP, as far as a tool for the parents and the communities, it's a little too cumbersome? Is that? I get head nods? Okay, so I see head nods. Did anybody say no, it's good? Okay, so we recognize it's very cumbersome. We also recognize that there needs to be some transparency where the money is being spent, and so we can track it and we can see what's being effective and what's not being effective. Is that what I'm hearing from everybody? I see head nods again. No one's saying no. So but what I think we're trying to do is we're trying to, and I offer this to you because I guess you're having this meeting on Thursday, that you're going to be putting out more guidance. Is that correct, sir?
So the state board is meeting on Thursday, and the materials have already been posted, and those memos that I referenced, the information memos, have been posted over the prior month. So this is actually requested action by the board to direct staff to proceed with the further development of the rubrics or to give us feedback on a different direction.
Okay, so maybe, I don't know if I can get free or get the information for it. My concern is, under sometimes good intention, you can start asking a lot of questions, and pretty soon something that was 150 pages can be 1,000 pages, all in the good intention of transparency. And we've already identified that one side that it's a very difficult tool as it currently is, but we do need to know transparency and spend the money. So is there any thought that maybe we can separate these two efforts and have one for the local community or some other process to be a more detailed analysis? Anybody want to try to jump on that one before I kick off on it?
So, Ian Johnson, Department of Finance. I think the two statements that you made, we completely agree with, that the LCAPs are not where we want them to be, and that we clearly, at the state level, need accountability, and we also need it at the local level. And that's something that the administration is very supportive of. But when we talk about tracking to the dollar how districts are spending their funding, I think first it's important to remember that there were and there still are accounting, budgeting, and auditing processes that are in place for school districts outside of the conversations that we're having. And LCFF did not take those processes away. And further, we've always been able to, and we still can, jump into CDE to data that's housed at Department of Education and look at exactly how school districts are spending their funding. Where you hear concerns from the administration is when we talk about treating supplemental and concentration grant funding like the categorical programs from which we came. And what we did with those was we tracked exactly how just that slice of school district budgets were used, and then very quickly we start to look at certain categories of where that spending is taking place, and without any context about sort of what the goals were for those students and what services were provided, and then what those outcomes were. And so
I understand.
I offer that the administration.
You don't. I got it. Okay. Any more?
Well, so just to say that we completely agree that there is transparency. It's just at the point, again, where we start to treat supplemental and concentration grant funding as categoricals is where you hear concerns from our perspective.
I think you gave your comments right there for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes is a perfect example of the problem that we're having. Let me be specific. When we're dealing with parents, people out in the communities, and all of us every day, have busy lives, getting up, getting kids to school, paying your rent, figuring out what you're going to do in the weekend. They're busy people. But we want them to be engaged in the education of their kids, right? When I ran through all that stuff, there's thousands of people making sure the streets work, the lights go, your trash is picked up, your lights go on. They're doing things, but I don't really care because I'm a busy person going through my life. How can can any of you give me an example of what do we do in society that tracks something that we really care about but we don't see all the detail unless we want to go into it. And we do it every day. I'll give you an example. Does any of you guys have these phones that have apps on them? Anybody ever buy an app? I do. You buy an app? So when you buy an app, you go look at it and you just pull it up and it tells you if it's 5 stars, and then you can go in reviews and you say, hey, I like that thing, and then I go for it, right? Now, some of you may be kind of a dink and you want to deal down to all the qualities of it. These are all, for that app I just popped up, these are the pages that go into the security of that app. It's probably about 100 pages. When you buy the apps, how many of you go into the 100 pages security and capability and the technology of that app? I did once just to see what it was like, and after that I said, I'm never doing that again. So my point is, if we could make a system when you meet that would give a parent the ability to see, like an app, this is my school, it's rated 5 stars, these are what parents are saying, God, I feel good about my school. But if I wanted to go into all the things that you're talking about, then I can look at the 100-page thing about everything else, and it'd be totally transparent. And I did that up here where you guys are talking in about 15 seconds. It went from the look and seeing on the app to all the detail. If the private industry can do that, SDG&E does that. Every week I get a little note from SDG&E that says, your energy consumption is this, and this is what your neighbors are doing. And then if I want to go into it again, I can look down and see all the little savings things I can do to save money. You know, see, industry's figured out how to take complex things and present it to busy people. And we need to do the same thing. We want to engage parents on local controlled funding. We need to do it in a way that they can engage in their busy lives, but still get into the detail. If you want to look at it at 3 in the morning because you want to look at it, you can do that. Do you think you can have that conversation on Thursday, or do you want me to come and have that with them?
So I believe that conversation will take place on Thursday. In particular, it's a little premature to talk about specific recommended changes to the template. As Ms. Brown noted, we've just sort of signaled to all the different stakeholders that this is a process that will take place between now and we expect the board to take action in September about what those actual changes will be. But the issue of the 400-page LCAP is one that we actually have been looking at even prior to now. For example, the board staff have sort of highlighted best practices or examples of some districts that have done an executive summary of their LCAP. So you have a longer document that sort of goes through all the pieces that need to be required under the current template, but there's a sort of snapshot preview that's talking about this is the core that goals and approaches that we're taking as a district in 3 to 4 pages. So that's an example I think that we're going to anticipate taking a closer look at as possible design of the LCAP template. But more generally on the app analogy for the application, that is what we're looking at in terms of the evaluation rubrics design, is that this is a tool that we're in the process of developing. We're asking the board to direct staff to proceed with the current proposed architecture, where we would be able to see at a summary level how is this local education agency or at the school site level, how are we doing in terms of outcomes, which is absolute, how are we doing as well as improvement over time on indicators that are relevant to the state priority areas under LCFF, and that information would be compared to how does that look compared to the overall statewide, how are we doing as a state, so that you have that information. But then there is the ability, and this is some of the technical design questions that we're going to have to get into, of then an LEA, for example, could run a report if I'm a superintendent and I want to dig deeper about how my English learners are doing, to be able to support that deeper look into the data, and then let that inform, are the investments that we're making in our LCAP in terms of programmings for ELs, maybe we want to reassess those.
Well, you're missing my point. I appreciate that. I really do. And I get it why you're doing it, 100%. But what's the objective of LCAP? You guys all said the objective is to get parents engaged in their children's education. Because we know when we did this 3 years ago was that one of the most important things we could help for teachers and we could help for people in education is to get their parents involved in it. that to get them involved in it. And so if you guys design it, they're not going to get involved. You know, it's like when I used to run in the military, you know, and I got all these little dink lieutenant captains giving me all these details about stuff. And I said, the bottom line, hit the bullet on the time that the infantry wants it to be there. I don't care about the sun, the shine, the moon, the rotation of the earth. Hit the thing at the time they want it there. And that's the same thing you need to do with the parents. If you design all that stuff, you need to then put it aside and bring in somebody who develops apps, the mentality that did that, and figure, how do I communicate to a busy parent who's a single parent who has 3 kids, 2 jobs, and trying to get to soccer practice? How do I do that? And you need to change it. Otherwise, we're going to fail on this. And this is so important. I think what Governor Brown did, and I think a lot of the leadership up here on local, is really important. But if we don't get the parents involved, we'll have a great idea. We'll have a 1,500-page report that we can say is really exciting, but no one will read. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we had over here first, Mr. Burdell.
Just thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to appreciate the complexity of this task. And I think it was highlighted, this is going to take time. People want to flip a switch when it comes to education, and those of us who have been in the classroom, who are experts in the field, know that that isn't possible. That's not how we're going to improve our education system. But first, if I could just ask a question of I believe it's Mr. Cabral, did I pronounce that correctly, from the LAO office. What I hear a lot from some groups is, gee, they really want to track where the funding's going, right? That's kind of the elephant in the room. They want to, and some people want it down to the student. Okay, I'm not there. I think that could create a problem, not solve a problem, quite frankly. But there is some concern about where the dollars go. And some of the dollars, quite frankly, do stay at the district office because you might be hiring a reading comprehension expert for ELL students. That might be a trainer of trainers to down at the site level. But in your study, is there one district that does this best as far as maybe tracking the dollars to the site level? And I know that when I've talked to my superintendent in Long Beach, he says he actually can track it to the site level, not so much the student level, which again I don't think is necessary, but the site level. Are there even established protocols? Should there be established protocols? But again, I want to highlight that some of the dollars are going to get streamed off into other places across the district and can't all land at a site, but eventually may impact a site. If you could respond to that.
Yeah, I think so. Our office we reviewed about 50 LCAPs in the first year, and the template has changed since then, so it's not the same. But I think as we were reviewing them, I think we had the same conflict, and we read several where we said, there's virtually no detail. I don't know how this money is being spent. And then sometimes there were some where we said, whoa, that's probably a little too much detail. I'm not sure that I needed all of that kind of information. And it makes it more kind of, as a reader who's not familiar with a lot of kind of the specifics of some of these programs, how it might be too much for me. I don't want to see all of that. I think the challenge is that I don't know that we know what the right level of detail is because everybody is coming at it from such a different place. I think if you're a parent, you need a much higher level, basic kind of set of information. If you're somebody who's, for me as someone who's involved in state policies, I know all the state terminologies, but districts are often talking about very specific, PBIS and very specific types of, for example, an acronym we kept reading about positive behavior intervention support, something that I don't know about and is too much. So I don't know that I would say that there's a specific district that sort of has it right. I think the challenge is figuring out as a state what level we want these plans to be at, and one of the challenges we found in reading it is just the lack of consistency in some cases. We think that there are some, and so I think having some opportunity to revisit the template and make changes we think makes sense, because there were just cases where should the template, what exactly is required here, we didn't think was clear. This district did it one way, this district did it another way. The way, I think, in general, the way that they've been reviewed, county offices are required to approve the LCAPs. I think they've just let districts decide how they want to do it because it's based on the local context. There are some places where we thought there might be some clarification, like specifying is this supposed to be only new funding? Is this, or is this also intended to cover all of the other activities that you've been doing as well? Should you be clarifying whether it's one time or ongoing? Should you be including stuff that you're doing with federal funding as well? Those questions are all not clear right now in LCAP, and there's a lack of consistency. And so we think at least being able to specify kind of these are the funds that you should be talking about. You should be talking about the increase in funding. Some guidelines we think would be helpful, but I don't know that we feel like there's a specific sort of level of detail that it's the right level of detail.
So I guess we haven't found that sweet spot yet, is what you're sharing with me. And again, I appreciate your concern that we don't turn these into categoricals again. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the fear that I'm hearing in this room, and it's certainly one of my fears. So I appreciate that. So this is something we're going to monitor. Obviously, this is still a new program. This is a huge change for California. Everybody's watching us. They want to see what we're doing. They want to see what happens here. So I appreciate that. And just two more quick questions. Mr. Sharp, could you just walk us through where we are in process with regard to the rubrics? You spoke about it. But where are we on the timeline as far as rubrics? What rubrics do we still have out there that need to be developed?
So the LCFF statutes required the state board to develop rubrics that serve three specific purposes. One is to support local identification of strengths, weaknesses, areas of improvement, the self-reflective needs assessment. Mm-hmm. The second is for to assist county offices or the department in reviewing and determining whether a local education agency is eligible for technical assistance under LCFF statutes that provide a standard for technical assistance. And the third is for the superintendent of public instruction to identify whether LEAs are in need of intensive state intervention, which is, again, one of the statutory sort of support and assistance provisions in LCFF. The current design of the rubrics is actually addressing those three purposes in sort of a single in a single instrument. I think we're probably looking at different instructions to sort of guide those different uses, but in terms of the information that's displayed and the sort of way of looking at the quantitative information and qualitative information about local programs would be generally the same across those three purposes. And the deadline is October 1st, 2016 in statute. And so the current timeline in the board materials indicates the proposal to adopt the rubrics at the board's September 2016 meeting.
So it looks like September it's going to happen. And I think there was some delay because of ESSA as well, right? Or could there be further delay because of ESSA, the code or the regulations, whatever you call the federal implementation language? Would there be some further changes potentially?
So at this point, we don't anticipate that. There was a timeline that was included in the board materials back in the November board meeting that was talking about sort of what we anticipated seeing at the January board discussion. The federal ESSA was enacted the next month, and so sort of pushed back by one meeting cycle that timeline. But we're at this point, we also in the current work plan, and this is included in the timeline that's with the current board materials, have sort of added a piece to the timeline about the state-federal plan alignment, and that's where the department is taking the lead on developing the state plan for the purposes of ESSA. And that's basically tracking the work that the board is doing on the LCFF evaluation rubrics.
Great, thank you. And then with just one question from Mr. Daniels. You said you're going to Blythe, correct?
Correct.
And can you tell me how you ended up in Blythe? Have you been to other school districts? What your activities will be in Blythe? Is this the first one? Walk me through where you are in your timeline as far as implementing your mission.
This is the first visit. This is the first district that we're going to be working with on an in-depth basis. We've primarily Dr. Cohn has visited a number of districts and charter schools around the state. We were invited to visit Palo Verde by the Riverside County Superintendent and the Superintendent in Palo Verde to go out. Dr. Cohn went out there last month, I believe, and sat down with the board president and the superintendent and had a very good conversation about sort of how the CCEE might be able to partner with and support Palo Verde. And so this visit at the end of the month, which is a 2-day visit, will really allow us to get a better sense of the district and the community, really understand their desires, their needs, so that when we do work with them, which will sort of begin after that point, we have a much better sense of how we want to do that. This is a pilot, and so we're sort of working out how best to go in, whether we'll be there a lot, whether it'll be less frequent but still in constant contact. Those details are sort of why we want to work with Palo Verde and potentially a few other LEAs to get a sense of how best to do that.
Okay, so this is the first district and you were invited.
Correct.
But there could be a situation where you're not necessarily invited, but the state superintendent directs, I don't know how this works, would they direct you to go take a look at the district, and the district would be required to cooperate? And I don't know what metrics they would use at this point, given that the rubrics haven't been adopted yet, or is that going to be later on?
Yeah, and I'll let Ms. Brown chime in as well. There is a provision under the LCFF law that would permit the state superintendent, to direct us to work with an LEA. The provisions of the law that would allow that to happen, because of the conditions that would need to occur, are not for a few years out. And so at this point, our interest is not to work with districts where we're being told, or that district is being, having us forced upon them, but really to work with districts in a partnership to understand them and their needs, and get them the right support. As I believe Ms. Burr and probably many others have mentioned, it's a spotlight and not a hammer. And so that is really the sort of mentality and approach we are trying to take.
Yeah, I would just add, Mr. Daniels is of course right that the required intervention support isn't for a while, but really what the department is really supporting, the goal of the collaborative is really around trying to not get to a place where we need that to happen, and really trying to have a place where the collaborative is viewed as providing assistance and not someone who's coming in because they're being forced to. And so really it kind of an open door where they can really work with the district. So we're trying to work with the collaborative and work with the board on how do we sort of model what they're trying to do in Blythe, so that we don't get to a place where we have to do that. But there are provisions in law that in a few years could happen.
Great, thank you. And just let me ask a question from a practical perspective, and I don't know if you even know the answer to this yet. Let's say you're invited into Palo Verde, and you've done some research, you've conducted your surveys, et cetera, you have some data, and you find that reading comprehension is pretty low. And knowing that area, pretty challenging area, they have a number of challenges out there. What would happen next? Would you bring in maybe some reading comprehension experts to then train staff? I'm sure those folks wouldn't be on your staff. You would act as the pass-through. How would that work, or do you know?
So one of our roles is to identify strong evidence-based best practices and providers to come in and work with districts. Whether or not a particular provider meets the needs of a particular district is part of the reason we'll go in and do sort of an initial assessment of the needs of a district. It may be that on paper a provider works very well with a district, but when we go into that district and we get to know them, we see that provider's not the best fit. It may be that we go in and we think there's an initial issue, say, for example, reading, and then we realize that there's another need as we've gotten to know the district, gotten to know the community, and we work with them as well. So it'll be a combination, and it will really be very district dependent and need dependent once we go in and get a better sense of what's going on.
Great. Just one last question, I'm sorry, for Mr. Cabral. With regard to that previous question of tracking the dollars, when do you think we would get to a point where we know what that sweet spot looks like as far as maybe some established protocols